Let's do it.
Yeah. So welcome everyone to today's webinar on how to optimize stores for profit maximization. So today we'll be talking around asset optimization in your stores. I'm joined today by my colleagues Angie Williams and Orna McGreevy, and we'll do introductions to the two guys in a minute. But first, just to give you a bit of context for today. So Andy's going to first bring us through what optimization is, really why we do it and how it works. And then how do you scale it and get it really perfected within your business? So how do you do the basics well, going beyond the basics, and what's next? And then Orta's going to bring you through really how do you take that theory, that business the kind of intelligence that you've garnered through that and build a business case to say this is why we should do this and the benefit it'll have for our company if we invest. So before we get into probably more of an explanation of who we are as a business and what we do, Andy, do you want to introduce yourself first and just give a bit of context of who you are and what your role is within LoweConex?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Andy, and I'm the Innovation and Data Director here at LoweConex. So primarily, my role consists of using data to help us develop a product to enhance our optimization efforts in terms of energy efficiency and maintenance. Really just trying to go beyond the basics and really bring machine learning and AI to the forefront of what we do.
Yeah, great. And then Orla, do you just want to give a bit of a background to your role and what you do?
Sure, no problem. Yeah, so I'm Orla. I'm our sales director here at LoweConex. Joined the business back in 2019, initially working for our parent group within the refrigeration arm of the business, and then moved a couple of years later into the remote monitoring and optimization arm, LoweConex, of the business. So predominantly my role is about working across retail and hospitality as those two core sectors for us, and looking at how best we bring in the data from their assets and the kind of critical running of their stores and sites, and bring them right through the automation and optimization journey.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So before we get into it, to bring it back probably to LoweConex, I know there's probably some people in the audience that have heard of us, some that haven't, and you might not have a really understanding of what our business is. So I'm not going to waste an insane amount of time talking. I'll let the experts kind of lead the day today. But I'll try to give a bit of a background into who we are first before we get into the topic. So basically we're essentially a data platform and we have our solution, Connects OS. So what we do with Connects OS is we connect to your existing buildings in your estates, the assets within them, such as your HVAC, refrigeration, lighting, your BMS. We pull that data out, we ingest it, we standardize it, unify it, and enhance that data with third-party information. So what that means is really we pull it all together, standardize it in a common language within one database and cleanse it, and then have it all within one location for you to use, analyze, pull that data out, and then use a range of applications that we have within our suite. So basically passing that information back to the people in your business, you can use that data now to do these other things. So our applications here are observe, analyze, and automate and control. And those are just three within our suite, but this is our main asset optimization suite of applications. So with observation, you can look into an asset, interrogate how it's performing. Analysis and automation is pretty self-explanatory. There's analyze that data, but actually layer it with automation and a preset defined library of workflows that let you stack rules on top of it to inform decision making of the assets. And then control enables two-way control back to those things, turning set points up and down, turning assets on and off, changing how things behave physically to then save energy, drive maintenance efficiencies across the company, and kind of offering you that means of getting marginal gains site by site. A few call to action things here on the right. We'll not waste time on those. You'll get the slides after and you can read into them. I'd rather us just get straight into the content and what we're here for today. So Andy, I'm going to come to you first for the first half of the session, and maybe some tough questions for you, but I'm sure you'll have plenty of answers for me. So could you first start off and explain what is asset optimization and yeah, why do we do it basically?
Yeah, sure. So what is asset optimization? If you ask anyone really what asset optimization is, they will probably suggest to you that it's all about increasing energy efficiency and cutting maintenance costs. And yeah, for the most part, that is exactly what it is. We try and bring about maximum value and efficiency of assets to really support those business goals. Energy and maintenance really come to the forefront because they are the easiest to deliver a return on investment on and actually show what that return on investment actually is. But there's various other things we can do with asset optimization. We could, for instance, be enhancing assets to ensure food safety is met, enhancing assets to ensure that store thermal comfort is met. So really, it is just about ensuring the assets are set up to meet what those business goals and objectives are.
Yeah, it's interesting bringing it back to the objectives piece. I guess it's kind of an order, you'll get into that more later in the discussion, really. But it's what are you setting out to achieve through it, I guess, and getting that objective really clear before you set into the process. It can help you really then measure the benefit of what you're able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as Andy said
Um,
as well, there's different formats too. You know, if you're a grocery retailer, that real focus on compliance for refrigeration and how that impacts safety, but also trade, needs to come to a forefront. So, you know,
mhm.
depending on what makeup of property estate that you are, that optimization can look very different.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so Andy, coming to you as well, I guess like why do we do this? I know we've kind of touched maybe there between a couple of things, compliance we've mentioned, and obviously cost savings, but there's a couple of other benefits in there. But why would a company look to do asset optimization?
Yeah, so first and foremost, it mainly comes down to cost savings. Generally, there's something driving the need to reduce costs and enhance what's shown on the bottom line. Cost savings are relatively easy to show, especially when it comes to energy optimization. You can clearly show a defined benefit from reducing the energy consumption and hence the energy spend. But yeah, there's some other intangible benefits that we can get from doing asset optimization. So, for instance, compliance, especially with food safety, customer and colleague experience. So, increasing or maintaining thermal comfort within a building can go towards that. We can reduce wastage as well. So, a good example of reducing wastage is on refrigerated cabinets where we've got night blinds being used. You can actually use the data to well, if you can determine that night blinds are in use, you can apply offsets to those cabinets to reduce wasted cooling efforts that you need to maintain the right temperature of those cabinets. So there's various different things we can do, but yeah, it all comes down to maximizing benefit and making the most out of your assets.
Yeah, I think it was also that wastage angle. I guess you kind of touched there on the kind of temperature waste of it, I guess, as such, like and how that impacts energy. And you know, if you're maintaining the asset better, how can you reduce that wastage? But it's even like time, people's you know, staff time in stores, how are you eliminating the waste of that so it can be better spent elsewhere to improve customer experience and how that can help the business, you know, generate more revenue, generate more profit by serving the customer because they're not caught up doing these manual tasks or constantly checking that things aren't broken or ringing engineers to come and fix things. It's like if things are just running more smoothly, it keeps the whole business as a whole, I guess, you know, more optimized and more efficient.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. So I guess then whenever we talked about this, we talked about approaches, and I know you've written a couple of blogs on this as well, Andy. So could you give us an idea of the two approaches that to asset optimization and how they work?
Yeah, so you can either go for a one size fits all approach or an asset by asset approach. And sometimes this is determined by what or asset types you're going to be optimizing. And sometimes it can be down to what platform you're using to optimize the assets. One size fits all is exactly how it says. It's a uniform settings approach, really to create a standardized baseline across all of your assets. So we take a fridge, for example, or an AC split system, we might standardize to have the exact same set point across an entire estate, but we would be ignoring any subtle differences in the surrounding conditions of where those assets are located or other things to take into account, like building thermal properties. The asset by asset approach, on the other hand, does take into account those differences. Um, it does give us opportunity for greater asset efficiency, but it does require a lot more resource to implement because you have to tailor your optimization strategy specifically to the asset, which requires more upfront work and then more work to actually carry out that optimization.
Hmm. I guess then this linking it back to what we discussed earlier around the objective again, it depends what you're going for. If the objective is, for example, food compliance, and you've got a fridge that needs to set at a certain temperature for a certain type of food or make, it kind of makes sense to do that first approach. But if it's energy and you're looking to optimize HVAC, you can see maybe asset by asset and taking those other aspects in, like thermal condition and that impact, how you could use that approach to
Yeah,
optimize.
no, exactly. And there's also a hybrid approach. You could do a bit of both. You
Yeah.
could start with the one size fits all approach just to get everything standardized, and then you might look to have a look at your outliers, which might need that bespoke asset by asset approach, either to bring them in line and get them to the baseline, or actually enhance what that baseline is showing.
So, so now that we've got like a firm understanding, we've covered what it is, we know why businesses do it. It's very rooted in objectives. Give us an indication of what best practice looks like. So how do we get the basics right first?
Yeah, so doing the basics well is the fundamental of how to optimize assets. So standardizing the asset settings. We want a degree of uniformity across different asset types and subtypes, and sometimes across different segments. Really simplify what we need to do to manage estates of assets, which could be consisting of hundreds of thousands of assets. We want to monitor the energy consumption. If we're optimizing an asset, we want to know what it's actually doing in terms of energy. Are we actually increasing the energy spend to potentially meet food safety regulations, or are we actually having the desired impact of reducing energy consumption? So we need to monitor that on an ongoing basis once we've decided to optimize an asset. All of this comes down to using data. We need to analyze the data, leverage it, analyze it, and really understand what it's telling us to help make informed decisions around what we want to do to increase performance. And just the other one I want to pick up on there is train staff effectively. This often goes unnoticed and doesn't really happen. If store are more knowledgeable about how assets should operate and what we should be doing to enhance asset efficiency, it makes our lives easier, because what we'll find is settings won't be getting changed without you knowing about it. You might even get phone calls from staff to actually report issues to you, so you can actually investigate them and actually begin to understand assets on a deeper level. So really talking with the stores and talking with staff can actually give you a deeper understanding of the assets and help you do the basics well.
Yeah, I think every time we run one of these webinars, it kind of comes back to like two angles, like both the data and the people element of it. And it's like, you know, if you're going to implement anything around this, around having the data, looking to get that out of your assets, but carry it forward to do an energy initiative, it's about bringing the people along. And I guess it's so true. Like training is really a key part of that to ensure that people get why are we doing this? Like, do you know what's the purpose of us investing in these things? Because if they don't know, they'll fight it, they'll resist, and it's a real key piece to keep everyone engaged. Um, so now that we've got like a very basic idea of how to do it basically, could you take us a bit further? Like, well, how far can this go, really?
Yeah, so going beyond the basics, this is where the fun really starts. You want to integrate as many external data sources as possible. So the obvious choice is external weather data. Most of the assets that we look to optimize in this world are, well, the energy consumption of them is dependent on what the external conditions are being faced. So bringing weather data in is a no-brainer, really. It allows us to then implement dynamic control strategies based on what the external weather conditions are doing. So we can actually respond then in real time based on current conditions to actually optimize performance and usage. And that might mean that we have different set points or a range of set points that we might want to implement depending on what the external conditions are doing. Then we can go a bit deeper and we can start to understand trends and patterns using AI and machine learning. So we can, for instance, use digital twins to forecast optimal settings and actually proactively adjust asset operations. It allows us to simulate what certain scenarios would actually have on those assets, which without actually implementing it first to actually see the desired impact. And if it's as expected, we can push it. If it's not as expected, we can try something else in a safe and effective way before actually optimizing an asset. Finally, the adopting self-learning systems. The analogy to this is self-driving cars. There's no reason why we can't have self-driving assets that learn to optimize themselves. So yeah, we can use a very niche subset of artificial intelligence to essentially have assets learn from risk and reward about what is the best route for optimization, and we can have various different optimization strategies for those assets. It could optimize purely for energy efficiency, optimize purely for comfort or compliance, or a mixture of all three. But self-learning systems really are where the future is.
I think there's so much there, but again, it is all rooted in that data piece. And I suppose for companies, and there's probably a mix within the audience today between smaller retailers or larger retailers that have a much more comprehensive system. But regardless of where you are really on your journey, it does come back to that data piece. And whether you're starting out or you're late in, it's not too late to cleanse the data, but it's not too late to start. So it's how do you improve what you have so you can unlock these things that are the future. Like as you say, having self-learning assets, it's the future of tech, but you'll never get there if you don't start with the data and have the right information of how to inform behavior.
No, that's right. Do the basics well, establish that baseline, and then you can go beyond the basics.
Good. So I guess that leads really nicely into this point, like about scaling it. So I've kind of touched there to say we've got some smaller ones, maybe some bigger ones, but if you do have multi-store states, how do you go about scaling that? Like more, I know we touched about the broad brush and applying everything the same, but if it was asset by asset, what's the approach to scale?
Yeah, so asset by asset is easy if you've got a handful of assets in your estate, but realistically, you're going to be dealing with thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of assets across entire portfolios. So really what this comes down to is you need a way to centralize all of this data. And even when you've centralized it, you need an effective way to be able to understand what each telemetry point is telling you. So what I mean by that is you could have various different asset types and subtypes, but let's say have a set point, but that set point could be aliased to something different across the different asset types and subtypes. Normalizing something as simple as a name across all those asset subtypes and subtypes can help tremendously when you just want to understand how to optimize an asset. Just being able to interrogate a platform and say, show me your set point, rather than show me set point A, set point B, set point C, it speeds up the time and processing power required to actually begin to understand what's going on with your assets. Once you've done that, you also need an effective way to send commands to your BMS solutions. You can sometimes do this on the BMS platforms itself. So if you take RDM as an example, you have a TDB editor. You can create a bespoke TDB program, which can be implemented on a BMS by BMS basis. Really, it's not scalable. What you want is a cloud-based solution where you can just create these rules in a platform, and these rules can then just be diverted to all the different BMS solutions that you're going to come across. So really, it comes down to having a centralized location that is allowing you to control and monitor from a single location.
And I guess like we've got a nice little kind of chart here to visualize that. Could you bring us through really what this flow is showing and kind of guide the audience how that process works?
Yeah, so really what this shows is that asset optimization never ends. It's this ongoing cyclical process where let's assume you've already ingested your data. First of all, you standardize it, and you might want to look to segment it. So segmentation could be, if you've got a fridge, for example, you might segment it to being high temperature and low temperature fridge cabinets. You might segment it by manufacturer, for example. It's just a way to break up your assets into more manageable chunks so that you can, rather than doing asset by asset, you might do a segment by segment analysis, which gives you a more top level view of your assets in your estate rather than an asset by asset basis. As we've been saying, going through this presentation so far, data is what we need. We need to leverage it and we need to unify it. So that is consistent aliasing. Once we get all the data into a good place, we know what assets we want to tackle through segmentation and standardization. This is where we can really automate our decisions. We want to create rules that can enact change across any of those asset types and subtypes from a single location, and we want to be able to monitor that in real time. And this just really completes the loop. Once we monitor the assets, we might find after a year of optimization that our assets are performing a specific way, and we might look to standardize all of our assets to a new baseline, and then the cycle starts again. It's just a never-ending loop of optimization until you get to a point where you just cannot optimize anymore. But we've not ever hit that so far.
I think that's probably important to flag that out. You might not ever hit the end because the surrounding environments, these assets is changing all the time. Like, the climate changes, the weather patterns are changing. So how can you really, hit that point of complete optimization? Things change and people don't know that the environment has shifted or the building facade has altered slightly. So it is an ongoing, just keep the data fed and kind of see how things are going and re-standardize and drive efficiency. Nice. Well, thank you so much, Andy, for that really great overview. I guess, what's next there. So with our data's optimized and using that insight, it's about creating these savings, moving towards profitability and improving the efficiencies with intelligence. So I'm going to pass to Orla now, who's going to really talk through a bit more about less so much more in the how do we do it and implement it, and the actually getting it into place, to more how does this help businesses grow to be more profitable, but also how do you build a business case to implement asset optimization in a company to prove the value that this can have to save money for a company. So or did you want to take us away there and bring us in how do you build a business case for asset optimization?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Connell. Yeah, so I mean, myself and Andy have worked very closely together over a number of years to kind of blend that technical with commercial. And I think even in this webinar, in the last kind of 20, 30 minutes, we've touched on some really key important bits. One being, engage the business, engage the people, train the staff, and that feeds really nicely into why do we build a business case? Well, why do we build it? It's because it's the people that drive our businesses. In our business, it's the people that build the software, that continue that R&D, that deliver it, and that's no difference within retail and hospitality. So, initially we have to win the hearts and minds, and it has to align with the overall business strategy before there's even a discussion about ROI or investment or whether that's commercially feasible. And so it's really, really critical to get that narrative correct and engage all the right stakeholders, not just from property or sustainability, but very much so multifunctional, multi-level, multifaceted, to make sure that project is ultimately set up for success. And sometimes as well, it can be simplified. It can be, this is our net saving, this is our ROI. There's a business case, but it really is much wider than that. And that level of engagement is where we see really successful deployments and adopting technology and managed service that is going to be sustainable and strategic and make transformational change instead of just being transactional as well. So we'll touch a little bit on that, how to build a business case and how to make it really resilient and sticky and get that buy-in from the business. Of course, in the potential impact, talk a little bit about, how we measure impact. And sometimes, Andy talked on this earlier, it can be from energy and maintenance and compliance savings. And sometimes it is actually about the softer benefits and how it aligns with the goals of the investors that are behind it. What metrics should be tracked, really important as well. And as that project is mobilized and as it's evolved and as the basics are done and then it goes beyond basics, how do you go back to those metrics that you set and not only measure whether that's been successful, but also be agile and realize that as technology evolves and as your relationship with automation and optimization evolves, that those metrics might need to change and grow and evolve over time as well. What does the projected ROI look like? Look, we're all here and we all know that money makes the world go round. So we want to make sure that these things are commercially feasible. We need to make sure that, we're being realistic by way of what pot does that budget come out of, and how do we make sure that investment is protected and de-risked, and how do we do that in a way that we use our data that's very specific to our assets, to our estate, and really actually use that in the best way possible with full transparency for all the stakeholders involved. And really, how do we communicate that success back? So, creating a structure in and around that business case. This is not a one-off. Like I said at the start, these are big transformational changes. And so there needs to be those milestones and those check-ins to understand that project is going in the right way that's anticipated.
I think the communication piece there at the end is just really key, isn't it? Like to pass that on and just make sure that the impact is communicated in the right way as well, that you're transparent with the impact, how things are going, where things are, and that's a really core aspect of for us as a business. I guess to start it off, getting into that buy-in piece, or how do you start to? I know you mentioned there about having multi-level stakeholders, property, sustainability. It's a lot of people to get buy-in from in the business. So how do you engage that process?
Yeah, it's for us, from a LoweConex perspective, we talk a lot about sustainability, and we've talked a little bit today about energy optimization and how that impacts from asset running. First of all, whenever we create business cases, it's also about making the retailers and hospitality businesses we work with sustainable, and not just from an ESG perspective, from a longevity perspective. Are you investing in the right partner and the right technology stack that's going to future-proof you and make sure that you're still here and profitable and trading in 3, 5, 6, 7 years plus time? And so that for me has to form part of that initial business case. Is all the numbers could add up, and you could have a really compelling ROI against other investments across your estate, and you could actually look at achieving net savings within year. But really, does all of that matter if the project doesn't align really strongly with what your strategy is as a business? That should be step number one. What are your objectives to achieve as a business? What are your challenges that are getting in the way of achieving those objectives? And then what are your requirements that you need to put in place around you to get over those challenges to achieve those objectives? And actually, if then that technology that you're going out to procure and to bring into the business aligns with that strategy, then it's about moving on to that phase 2 of that business case and really understanding then that numerical impact and how that hits from a commercial point of view. But step 1 is absolutely about that multi-stakeholder engagement and sitting down as a business and saying, from our latest ESG report, from our latest annual statement, from the last investment committee meeting, we committed that this is where we want to be in 5 years' time. Does this project support it, or does that project distract us? And actually, if it is the former, then we move on to the next stage of the business case, which is the pounds and pence.
Yeah, I think that's like for us at that really early stage, it's probably one of the first questions that we're asking when we're engaging with companies. What is the business's biggest priority, or what's the biggest challenge within your role at this moment in this time? To really understand, what is your part to play in that too, and how can this help you to achieve those things within your own company? So I guess maybe we've talked there about, those benefits. There's lots of different benefits from asset optimization. I know today's webinar is focused on profit maximization, which is more the tangible side of things, but could you bring us through the different types of things that a company could expect to see from implementing something like this?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, as you rightly said, the tangible is a logical place to start. Once you've got that data, it's really easy to start to create that baseline and project an ROI and start to understand, why there should be investment made behind that particular project. And that could be things like food wastage reduction through, enhanced compliance. It could be looking at, raw energy data and understanding how we want to decrease that across the estate, and having that kind of OpEx impact. It could be looking at directly, reducing the cost of engineers going to site, or replacing components on assets by moving towards a predictive maintenance model than a reactive model. And so all of those together really starts to strengthen that business case and starts, putting that forward by way of, this actually is a project that's very easy to de-risk, because this is the rewards that we get at the end of it. But on the flip side of the coin, sometimes that means that the kind of intangible and strategic pieces of a business case can be missed or can be overlooked. And actually, they can be just as financially valuable, if not more. And so if I kind of give some of the examples of how we've supplemented that, through the intangible benefits, typically these are benefits that can have a really significant financial impact to the business, but they're harder to quantify before the project is rolled out. So that could be things like, if we are really intelligently controlling the comfort bandings within a property estate. What impact does that have on trade? Does that increase basket spend? Does that encourage somebody to stay for longer and buy a few more pints in a bar? How do we start to look at some of those other softer benefits around labour redeployment, as you touched on earlier? It may not be a direct reduction of overheads, but how do we then refocus that time on merchandising and customer engagement and customer service? And typically then, as that technology is rolled out and it becomes more measurable across the estate, those things that were intangible 12, 18 months ago start to become really easy to measure. So it's really important to capture them at the start of that business case. And then the last piece is strategic. Back to the kind of objectives of a business. What's happening at that board level? What's happening at that C-suite level? Are there conversations, for example, around cybersecurity, how you partner with the right technology providers that are kind of best in class and are going to be that one step ahead in the market and provide that level of assurance and protection? A great example is a customer we started to work with last year. Were refinancing a pretty significant chunk of their debt and able to get a much more competitive interest rate if they were able to prove kind of investing in green projects. So again, you wouldn't really have that in measuring a tangible benefit on a business case, but actually had a significant long-term impact in the financials of that business. So really, really important to take that kind of wider bird's eye lens and not just look at that immediate, short-term reduction in cost of the business, but zoom out that little bit and understand how that aligns really strongly to the overall objectives.
Yeah, and the potential return, especially in that latter point. But I'm going to come back to the intangible stuff as well. But that latter point, a lot of companies wouldn't think of that from that return is actually plotted back to this type of initiative or that implementation, but actually not having something around asset optimization, green technology, green solutions, it really stifles the business from achieving those types of things in the market. But even the intangible side of things, as you said, there, it's something I never really thought of myself to be like, in a store environment or, in a pub or something like that. And if the setting or the environment is off-putting to you, whether it's something to do with like, lighting being broken or, HVAC units being broken and the temperature's off whack, like things like that, like you don't really think of it day to day as a consumer. But you probably do make very conscious decisions when you walk into an environment if you're uncomfortable to leave. And how does asset optimization kind of interrupt that subconscious thinking in the consumer as they come into these types of very consumer, public footfall dependent environments that to drive profitability? It's such a crucial way, but again, hard to measure in a business case and hard to propose because it's a really difficult thing to put a number beside, but it definitely should be considered in these types of
Yeah.
decisions, as you
Yeah.
say.
And there's absolutely processes to do that over time as well. I mean, we have another customer within the hospitality kind of industry, and what they do is they take those NPS scores from customers, and that measures things like comfort and the ambience and the environment. And actually, over time, the more that we onboard more assets and optimize, that can be overlaid with that
Yeah,
data.
getting that
It's just like
explained
what
happens.
Andy said, bringing in as much external data as possible allows you to
Yeah.
much better control that estate, and all of those things then start to become obvious around what impact that's having on the business.
Yeah. You know me too well, or I'm walking into stores now, checking out the temperature and things all the time. So
That's why I don't go shopping
I
with you
can't help
anymore,
it.
Connell.
I know I can't help it. That's it. So I kind of want us to walk through an actual business case, and this is something that you would build nearly every other week, Corda, but really focusing on HVAC optimization with the goal to reduce energy consumption. So if that's the business case, then that's what they're coming to us to do. How
Yeah.
would you build a case to do this? So we have some slides here firstly to go through, but if you want to guide us through.
Yeah. Well, look, it comes back to what we talked about a lot. Is we've mentioned it many times on this webinar, and I'm sure we will again. It's the data. So let's simplify it. Let's look at the makeup of the estate. What type of format do you have? How many sites do you have? What sort of breakdown of assets do you have? Are they being locally controlled? Are they being centrally controlled? What is your comfort bandings and the thresholds that are there? What is your tariff rate from an energy perspective? How much are you using? And a lot of those kind kind of data points are readily available to a business. And
Mhm.
it's really about creating that level of understanding so that it's really accurate, and so that as you start to then widen that kind of field of influence and bring more stakeholders and colleagues into it, they look at that and understand, yes, that's my business that I'm looking at, that's the property portfolio that we're looking at, and this isn't something that's pulled from other estates that we've worked on, or it's not something that's that's very high level. It starts to become more and more specific to how we're actually going to improve that estate.
Yeah. I think this is very that like key results kind of aspect of the case. Like, what are we measuring and how are we going to get success? So,
Yeah.
do you want to bring us through what's on the screen here?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is again a really, really kind of simplified method of where we would start in an early stage engagement in building the business case. So some of those key metrics that we just touched on, what is that average store size? Like I said, this is quite a simplified one. There are additional ways to build up that kind of matrix view if the estate is a bit more complex or a bit more nuanced, or you don't really have a one size fit all cookie cutter approach. And so what we tend to do then is we'll bucket various different formats so that we can extrapolate up that data and make it as relevant at a full estate scalable level as possible.
Yeah.
But this example is if the estate is fairly standardized. From that square footage, what we'll then tend to look at is an average amount of kilowatt hours that are used in that store per day, and then really starting to then look at what impact that's having across the store per year, and then across the estate per year as well. So as we start to extrapolate up in this example, we're using 130 kilowatt hours per day across an average of about 1,200 square foot of a store and 360 stores. So really starting to then bring that data up very, very quickly. We can start to look at similar estates and what energy reduction impact we have had in that. And taking that data specifically and taking that percentage allows us to then start to project from an energy perspective, what does that ROI and that net savings lead us to? And how quickly will that offset a CapEx or an OpEx investment for the project?
Okay. So it's just kind of really doing like kind of like a top down kind of bottom up analysis, like taking that and using energy data to kind of get somewhere. I guess then taking that forward, if we were to save 8%, like what type of saving would this case see?
Yeah. Well, in this particular example, we would be saving over 1.3 million kilowatt hours per year. We're taking it a bit as an average, tariff. Again, a lot of these metrics can be made very specific to the estate that we're working in.
Yeah.
But that will be looking from an energy lens alone of about 341k saved per year. At a kind of estimated implementation cost of 140k. So really, really competitive ROIs coming in at in around 7 months for that example. But if we look at some of the particularly connected estates that have already invested in BMS or IoT gateways or sensors, we've seen ROIs in those examples as low as 3 months.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy, isn't it? To kind of get it back that quick at that level as well, to get that saving and really see that return in 3 months is really impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's about, working with those retail estates, as Andy mentioned earlier, where, we have experienced limitations on the infrastructure of building strategies within a data manager, within a kind of edge device logic. And actually the benefit of bringing that into a cloud native system and bringing intelligence and automation overall just allows us to unlock those kind of aggregated marginal gains very, very quickly, but using the actual physical infrastructure that's already been invested in.
Amazing. So I guess then as well, we talked earlier about it tangible. I think a lot of these are very tangible. Within maintenance then, this probably gives another view of how do you measure that impact. Could you just walk us through this as well and how we've broken this down?
Yeah, well, we love information. We love making business cases as specific as possible. And like, if there's anybody in our business that loves that more than me, it's definitely Andy. He's nodding along in the background. But yeah, where possible, we'll work with our customers to try to get information from the likes of CAFM systems, work order history, contract history. And this is another example of where we've done that and looked at an average kind of HVAC related engineer call outs from a store, it was about 6 per year. We then looked at the average cost of what they were paying a contractor perspective, alongside the additional cost of the likes of PPMs and component replacements whenever those assets had kind of deteriorated so far that it needed, new compressors, etc. And so really look at what that total cost would be of the reactive maintenance. We'll then go in again and map that across similar estates and understand, well, what impact did we have in reducing that work order activity within that first 12 months? And that's really through things like really comprehensive lifetime reporting, so that engineers can increase that first time fix. They know what to bring, they know what's broken, they know how long to spend on site. It's about being able to preventatively alert as an asset is performing in a more poor condition instead of waiting until it's completely broken. It's about, really being able to mark those assets peer on peer and start to then remove a lot of those unnecessary and wasted visits. So again, really kind of quick to be able to look at what that target reduction is. And so bringing that back to your average cost, average amount of work orders from a HVAC perspective across the estate, giving us that then maintenance reduction of about 135k on top of the energy saving.
Yeah. I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball here and probably say, on the energy side, it's much easier to build a business case. And we're on maintenance, it can be a wee bit more tricky, because obviously sometimes that data in some states will be hard to come by. If they don't have the CAD firm, or they don't have the right process around maintenance, it can be a bit blurrier. But where they have that data, I guess it really comes back to that piece of understanding, not leaving yourself blind to your maintenance processes. And that's kind of where we come in to really help inform that intelligence around what's going on with the assets, what things are being raised, how much is going to the CAFM, and how much you spending on your maintenance partners. Because typically too, we're all about reducing waste, and not just waste within energy, but waste within maintenance. Because a lot of the time people are going to site, there's nothing wrong, or it's something that could have been fixed remotely through just the quality of store, a quick defrost cycle of a fridge that's frozen up, or things like that engineers are arriving to site, and it's a waste of business time and money.
Never thought I'd be hearing you talk about defrost cycles, Connell.
I never thought a year ago I would be talking about
very
defrost
proud,
cycles either.
very proud.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that's
like you're
it.
spot on, and that's where every single estate is different, and that's where I think it was useful for us to talk about the kind of tangible, intangible, and strategic way to build a business case. And I think if that data is available, absolutely that can go into that tangible bucket. If it's not, that's absolutely fine, and that's where it typically tends to move into intangible. And that's where then, as we partner with that retail business, and as we get more data, and as we further optimize, and we gather that data in our platform and centralize it and report on it, that's whenever it then moves from the intangible back to the tangible, and we can start to put that pounds and pence around it. So yeah, it really kind of varies depending on what's available up front versus what we gather over that period of automation.
Yeah, awesome. So I guess with this one, just to give it a view of overall potential ROI, coming out at for every £1 there, about 340 return. And that's really just dependent on those variables, and that's a very basic run through we've given there. Anything to say on this?
I think the only thing here is, what's really exciting, and my experience certainly over the last 6 years or so of being in this business is, building a business case in this way is typically what allows the purse strings to be unlocked, and it allows that project to kind of get started and mobilize. But what's actually really exciting is as then we start to move into that project breaking even, and as we start to recognize those net savings, it comes back to what Andy talked about earlier around, how do you go beyond the basics? And as you really start to move into self-optimizing assets, and as you start moving into the world of, bringing in external data, particularly estate-specific data. So yes, things like external ambient temperature, but things like occupancy and trade data and footfall and all these other things, that ROI just becomes more and more expansive, because that process we've just walked through is very much so based on getting the basics right. But that is step number one. And actually working with a partner, really important, that's driven and passionate about year-on-year efficiencies and year-on-year savings. That's whenever that £1 to £3.40 starts to then get much bigger.
It's like you've read my mind there. It's literally exactly as I was thinking as I read that, to be like, this is just really the start with the HVAC. And that's just in one asset category. We're optimizing one thing. whereas you connect more and you do more things, you get more data around the estate. I spoke at the beginning around our solutions with asset optimization, and those are just 3 applications of that data that we can use, but we can start to layer more things on, from F-gas tools to automated M&V, and how can all those things help to speed up processes across the entire business, just because you've got this rich data that's coming straight from your sites into a software, and lets you just analyze and do things and change how things behave. It's very, very powerful tool to have.
That's it.
So as we kind of wrap up the session, I just thought it would be great to talk through a couple of actual case studies of actual clients we've worked with. Some of them are anonymized, some of them not. Or did you want to walk us through this particular case?
Yeah, I mean, I love, this is probably one of my favorite case studies, and one of my favorite projects that I've worked on over the last few years. But fascinating estate by way of their global leisure and sports retailer. We started working with them across the UK and Ireland, but are now doing things further afield across Europe and the USA. But really kind of complex estate, in that they've got lots and lots of different formats, ranging from quite straightforward fashion stores, through to leisure sites, through to gyms, through to outdoor sites. And so we really have to look at the one size fits all approach does not work in this, because what one site needs for optimization will not be reflective on another site. Really interesting estate as well, in that the vast majority of the estate had BMS. And so we were able to come in and provide very, very immediate value by ingesting the data via API, centralizing it, unifying it, cleansing it, and then actually being able to optimize that through our kind of intelligent rule sets and libraries in the back end of the system. But also a portion of the estate did not have BMS because of the square footage of the site and the lack of assets, just didn't give a kind of commercially feasible business case for the investment. And so we've actually been able to bring a solution to them as well that actually encapsulates that at a lower capex, and to be able to then have a fully connected estate, and for them to see all of their data and all of their critical assets in one environment. So it's been a really, really exciting journey, because it's been connected and unconnected. It's been lots and lots of different formats, lots of different geographies, lots of different climates, lots of different asset categories, everything that they can throw in it. But I think the figures speak for itself. I mean, last year we actually saved enough energy. This is without any of the kind of maintenance reductions and benefits, or reductions of people traveling to site and changing things, just from a pure energy reduction point of view, for them to actually be able to completely power 39 of their stores. So really, really, kind of impactful by way of how we've measured that. And actually we're, supporting them and continuing them to actually hit their 2030 net zero goals as well. And this will be our 3rd year of working with this retailer. So yeah, it's a great success story.
The topic of profit maximization, running 39 stores for free on electricity for a year isn't a bad deal, so I think it kind of really drives that home, the commercial importance of optimizing assets and what that can unlock statewide, just doing it on that site-by-site basis. Another one as well, then, Mid-Counties Cooperative, we've had a great relationship with, and huge success. Could you talk us through a bit about what we've done there?
Yeah. I mean, another really, really fascinating, really innovative, company, really just hungry and eager to do the right thing and to manage their estate responsibly. And that's really lovely, because it aligns really clearly with our mindset and with our culture as well. So it's always really nice to work with retailers that are like that. This one certainly has complexities by way of the layout, because you are having to consider not just customer experience and comfort, but you have to consider the compliance of the refrigeration, how they're running, that dynamic relationship between HVAC and refrigeration, and how cyclical that is as well. And so, the journey for us here was that we started with a portion of their estate that had the BMS installed in it, already had all of their refrigeration kind of connected, and we brought that data in and standardized how that refrigeration was running, optimization through things like suction pressure optimization, rewriting of the defrost cycles, standardizing the thresholds that the units were running in, looking at things like how door openings were impacting compliance. And that's evolved really strongly over time to then bring in data from from HVAC and other asset categories to really move them towards a complete virtualized estate. And that's not uncommon, really, really common for us to take this phased approach and start by looking at a portion of the estate or one individual asset category, prove that value. So again, back to the point of buy-in from stakeholders. If there's skepticism, start small, prove it, grow it out. And that's exactly the way we started with mid-counties, and that relationship has really evolved over the last few years.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting one as well. It's great to see such successful news as well, like in media about our relationship with them. Just an article there in the Co-op News that they had published themselves there in May, showing the impact of 6% energy reduction, and they've saved over 2 million kilowatt hours of electricity, which is a massive accomplishment for such a smaller co-op estate. It's a big impact. So they've done a great job at that optimization effort, and the relationship has just been brilliant. So I think that's a really nice way to kind of to wrap up today. Or there's a lovely picture of you, and if anybody would like to learn a bit more about asset optimization or talk about fridges and HVAC, Orla loves a good Teams chat about all those great things. So
I'm just glad I'm not wearing that shirt today, Connor.
I know, God, I know. We really need to update that photo because it's getting a bit dated now, isn't it? But no, thank you so much, guys, for your time today. It's really, really great session. Really great session, and I think we covered a lot there. So thank you.
Super. Yeah, thank you both.
Yeah, thanks all.